Okay, we should be live. Can I get in the chat if people can hear me? Give me some reactions. Give me a bit of feedback if everyone can hear me and we can go ahead and get started. I'll ask on the Discord if you can't comment on the YouTube. Intermediate stream. Want to make sure this is working. Ah, okay, cool. Thank you. Okay. Okay, good to have someone there. So what you guys will notice, why you guys couldn't comment. I realize. What we've set up is something very cool where you're able to watch while coding. So you don't have to change tabs. Your watching can happen in the exact same place. So what's really cool about it, so if you want to comment on the YouTube stream, click on the YouTube button to come to YouTube. And you'll be able to follow along or comment and ask questions there. Otherwise, if you want to ask questions, come to the Discord server and ask there. Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and get started. The thing that we're gonna be coding today, has anyone ever played Geometry Dash? This game. And the way it works is that you have this little cube that rushes across the screen and jumps over targets. We're going to be coding a game like that today, and it's going to give you some really good foundations for building what you want to build. So enough talking, we're going to dive into it. The very first thing that we're going to be doing is getting started. So make sure you're following along with me by coding here. You can come to code.strymap.com or click new. I'm going to start by just drawing a square to the screen under draw. So I'm going to start by drawing a square and we're going to draw it, let's say at position x50, y0, and it's going to be 100 in size. So this is going to be our character. We can draw another square to represent our enemy or our obstacle. So let's draw another square. We're going to draw it at a square 500. Let's draw it at 0 and a size of 100.
Hey guys, if you're watching this on Zoom, don't be watching this on when it's either the beginner or the intermediate workshops. It's Zoom, kind of enjoy that instead.
Okay. And so let's put some comments so we know what we're following. This is our player. This is the obstacle. Okay. The first thing that I actually want to do is I want to get my player to bounce or to jump. That's the key thing. If we're going to be coding something, let me show you exactly the end output that we want to be getting to. You guys can see what this is over here. There we go. Okay. This is what our end output looks like. And so the first thing we want to start with this guy is just getting the cube to jump, as you'll see over here. So we just want to get the cube to jump like this. This is the first thing I want to focus on. And so the way we're going to do that is by changing the y. So the y of our player is what's going to define the movement. So I'm going to create a global variable up at the top here, and I'm going to call it y player. I'm going to make that equal to 0. Inside of draw, I'm going to say global y player in order to access this global variable. And I'm going to utilize it over here inside of the square. So now we have y player. Now, if inside draw, I just go y player plus equals 5. The square is going to move up and off the screen. But we don't want that, right? Where we want to get to is a place where it's jumping like this. So what we need to do in order to get it to jump is we move it up, but what we want is for it to start moving down after some time. So like when you first jump, you're moving up a little bit, and then after some time, you start moving down. The way we can do this is I'm going to create a new variable called player velocity. So velocity is how fast you move, right? So if I make my velocity very fast, so instead of saying 5 here, I'm going to say player velocity. And this is now controlling my speed. So what you'll notice, if I make this very quick, it's going to go very quickly off the screen. As of what you notice, if I start my player, so instead I'm going to use this variable y player. If I start him instead of at 0, if I'm starting him at 500, and I make my player velocity -10, notice how it falls. So when my velocity is negative, my block falls. When it's positive, it moves upwards. Let's go ahead. I'm going to draw these variables to screen using something called text, so we're able to follow along with this. I'm going to text and draw, let's say, my Y player. So I'm going to say Y player. And I'm going to use something fancy in Python called formatting in order to show this variable. So I say text, I open these quotation marks, and I say dot format. And I'm going to put Y player inside of here. And now just to specify where I'm going to draw this text, let's say it's going to be at 400, 400. By default, text is black, so I need to make it white, so full white. And I need to make the text size a little bit bigger. And so here I can see how my Y player, let's make this even a bit bigger. I can see how my Y player is changing over time. So now in order to get this effect that we're looking for, to get it to bounce, we need to also introduce something called acceleration. Acceleration is how much our velocity changes, because what we want is we want a positive velocity starting with, and then we want it to start decreasing. So if I go ahead and say another variable, I'm going to say player acceleration. And this time I'm going to make it equal to, let's say, -0.5. I'm going to add it as a global variable under draw, so player acceleration. And now what I can do here is I can change my velocity with this acceleration. So I'm going to say player acceleration plus, oh, sorry, not player acceleration. I want to change my velocity. So player velocity plus equals player acceleration. And what you're going to notice now, so I've got an error, player velocity reference before assignment. So I haven't defined it as a global variable inside of draw. So what I need to do over here is I need to define it as a global variable inside of draw. And now, okay, cool, we get this kind of effect. The way that this is working, so let's bring Y player back down to 0. And let's start with a player velocity of 20. And so what you'll notice is we get this jumping effect. Every time I run or restart this, it's going to jump. So what's happening is, what we can do is actually make this way more clear. I'm going to take the same line of text that we did here, this Y player one. I'm going to copy paste it, and instead of showing Y player, I'm going to show player velocity. So player velocity. And I'm going to format over here, dot format, player velocity. So you can see that code over there. Oh, okay, now it's on top of one another, so I just need to move that text over here to be a little bit down. Okay, now I can see how this is working. If I want to make this really slow, to show how this is working in a slow rate, I'm going to put something frame rate, and I'm going to make this 10. Frame rate is just going to reduce the speed of my program. So what you could see here is that the player velocity is starting positive. It's starting at this 20. But over time, because each frame we're adding this negative acceleration, the player velocity is decreasing. It's going down. And that's how we then get this effect, oh, wrong button. That's how we then get this effect of what looks like it starts moving up and then it drops down. The thing I want to add, so I'm going to just add this little comment.
still in the Zoom and not in another call, click on either one of the workshops.
If the way I'm just gonna carry on. Sorry, I was listening from something from the Zoom call. I'm gonna just comment this out over here to say that this is for debugging. And the next part, so what the next part I want to actually do is stop it once it reaches the bottom. So when it reaches this point over here, notice how it goes through the screen. I don't want it to go through the screen. I want it to stop. So the way we're going to do it to stop is with an if statement, where I'm going to say the following. I'm going to say if y player, our y player variable, if that is less than or equal to 0, like that, then we want to make y player equals 0, and we want to stop the player velocity. So I'm going to say player velocity is equal to 0. And now what should happen is when it gets there, what we can do is let's move up our frame rate again. So when it lands, it should stop. And this, we're going to get that nice effect. I'm not seeing any questions in the YouTube. Am I seeing any questions in intermediate? I'm not seeing any questions in intermediate. So I'm going to assume everything is good. Ask questions or if something isn't clear, engage and I'll be able to help. If you guys want help, so what I'm going to do now, if you guys have been struggling to follow along, you can take this code. So take the code that I've put here. I'm going to copy paste it. I'm putting it in the chat over here. Copy paste that code into your project. That way you'll be able to follow along if you've lost your place. Okay, so we have a bouncing or jumping block. The next thing, let's see what the next step that we want to get to is. So we've added it. So, oh, okay. We want it to, when we press space, we want to jump. We want to control our block to add controls. So when we hit space, our player jumps. The way we're going to do this is that we need to come outside of draw. So we're going to set up a new function. And the way that this function works is it goes def key pressed. And this function runs whenever I press a key on my keyboard. So any key that I press will be getting this function to run. And the way we get the code of the key, right? So now every key on our keyboard is assigned to a numeric code. So what you'll notice if I do this, so I'm going to say text. I think this will work. Let's find out. Or rather, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to say print, and I'm going to say key code. So now whenever I press a key, you'll notice in the console over here, I'm getting a number coming out. And so these numbers represent the numeric code of the key on my keyboard. What we want to bind it to is space. And the key code for space, if you see, if I press space here, if this works, I need to press on the thing, is 32. So whenever I press space, the key code 32 comes out. So what I need to say is I say if key code equals 32, this is when we want to jump. This is when we want to have our player move upwards. And we know how to make our player move upwards. When our velocity is positive, our player is going to move upwards. So if here, so I'm going to define a global variable inside of key pressed called our player velocity in order to access this player velocity. And I'm going to say player velocity is equal to 20. And now what you'll notice is when it lands, I'm going to press, there we go, and it goes. This will actually keep working. So the way we have it set up right now is that it'll just keep bouncing. So if you keep pressing space, you can see how my Y player goes all the way up. Goes pretty fast. If we go very high, you can see how quickly its speed starts increasing. So this is how we can get it to jump. So we have our player jumping. The next milestone that we want to focus on is creating an obstacle. So now we have this guy, but now we want an obstacle that's going to follow our path every time we move along. The way we're going to create this obstacle, we already have it here. But we now need it to move across the screen. So let's go ahead, first and foremost, let's make the obstacle a little bit more colorful. We're gonna fill our obstacle red, and let's fill our player over here green. So our player is green, our obstacle is red. So we want our obstacle to move across the screen. So we need to define a variable for our obstacle. So I'm going to say x obstacle, and I'm going to define that to, let's say 500. And now in my obstacle code over here, I'm going to say x obstacle. And now in order to get it to move across the screen, I need to decrease x obstacle. So I'm going to move all of my global variables over here so they're a little bit more viewable. And I'm going to say x obstacle. And we have a bad input on line 12. I'll try, see, I think maybe they do all need to be on one line. Maybe it's complaining that I've moved everything. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So all your global variables do have to be on one line. So I defined a global variable x obstacle. I defined it under global inside of draw. And I have now defined it as the position of my square. If I now say x obstacle minus equals 1, it will start moving to the left across the screen. Obviously, that's quite slow. Let's go minus equals 5. And it starts moving nicely. Okay, I'm going to pause again. Are there any questions? Ask questions now either in the Discord or in the chat. I can post the Discord here. I'll wait 2 seconds to see if there are any questions. Okay, I'm going to assume we're good. Okay, so again, my key press does not give me a key code. So just make sure your syntax is correct, would be the thing I'd suggest. So make sure that key pressed is defined as a function outside of draw, that you have your brackets here, the semicolon, check that you're not getting any syntax errors. And then when you print key code, you should see it. Okay. To carry on, the next part we want to get is actually the most complicated, which is collision detection. How can we tell when our block hits this block? So to help visualize this, I'm going to draw these lines around our obstacle. And so there are these commands that we've recently put in called vertical line and horizontal line. So I'm going to say vertical line. And the way vertical line works is that you give it an x coordinate that is going to draw a vertical line through. So in this case, let's say I wanted to draw a vertical line at an x coordinate 500. I'm going to start it at position 0, and it's going to go all the way up to, let's say, 600. Okay, you can't see it right now because it's very thin, so I'm going to just put a stroke. I'm going to make our stroke red. I'm going to say stroke weight 20. This is going to change the color of my line and the thickness. So now you see we got this line, and now everything looks a little bit crazy because all of the strokes and all of the stroke weights have been changed. So right at the beginning of draw, I'm going to set my stroke to black, and I'm going to set my stroke weight to 1 so that the rest of my things aren't too weird. Okay, so we have this vertical line. Why are we drawing this vertical line? You'll see. I want to draw it where X obstacle is. So I'm going to, instead of drawing it at position 500, I'm going to draw it at X obstacle. And now you'll see I get this line that is following along with the obstacle. I'm going to draw another line at the end of my obstacle. So the size of my obstacle is 100 pixels. So I'm going to say X obstacle plus 100. And now you see I get 2 lines. You know what? If anything, let's go with a stroke of yellow. Let's see if we can see it. So that way we can see it's different. Yes. Okay. So now I can see I have these 2 vertical lines. I'm going to add one more line, horizontal line. And this one is going to just be at a horizontal line is just going to go across. We want it to be at a y coordinate to go across at 100. So I'm going to say 100, and I'm going to say it starts from 0 and goes until the width of the page. So the way we're going to tell for collision detection is what I'm going to stop my obstacle moving in order to illustrate this. If this green block is inside of this area, if it's past this right line, and it's left of this line, and it's below this line, it means that we're colliding with this block. So I'll say that again. In order to tell if we have a collision, this green block needs to be past this line on the left side of my obstacle. It needs to be past this line on the right side of my obstacle, and it needs to be below. If it is in here, it means that we have a collision. How do we turn this into code? There's actually one more thing I'd want to mention before we dive into that. The last thing I want to mention is that we need to detect for both. Let's start. So we're going to start with testing if my X obstacle. So do we have this? So we know our X of our player is 50. Let's go ahead and define that as a variable. We're going to need that. So currently this player position is 50. All I'm going to do is just say X player. I'm going to make that equal to 50. And I'm going to use that inside of square, X player. Okay, it's the exact same thing. I've just made a variable. So what I want to say is if X player is greater than the line that we saw previously. So I'll comment this out so we're able to see this. I want to tell, is my X player past this line over here, the left boundary of my obstacle? So the way I'm going to say that is if X player is greater than X obstacle. That's going to tell me for the left boundary. But what happens if it is, so we need to tell that it's past this left line, but it's before this right line. So we're going to say X obstacle greater than that. And I'll send the code again now, and X obstacle, or rather, and X player is greater now. We want to tell if the player is, if it's past that, but it's before the other one. Yes, and X player is less than the right boundary, which is X obstacle plus 100. And last and, if X Y player is less than 100. If this happens, I'm going to add this line that says no loop. So if this happens, it's just going to stop the code. So again, this is tricky, so I'm going to go over it. So if my X player is to the left of this line, that's this first if over here, and it's before this line, so that means X player is less than X obstacle plus 100, and it's below this line, we get a collision. So let's see if this works. I'm going to get rid of a player velocity. I'm going to make my player velocity 0, so it doesn't start with jumping. And I'm going to bring back the movement of my obstacle. If this works, the whole thing should stop. And it does stop. So our thing is working. It's stopping, but it's not stopping in the right place. Where we need it to stop is when it first collides. Because what we're currently checking, if I needed to visualize this, I'm going to draw another vertical line at my player. So I'm going to draw a vertical line at X player, and that's going to go from 0 to height all the way to the top of my screen. So we're checking, hey, when this line is between these two, but we want to check not only that line, we also want to check the right side of our player. So vertical line, X player plus 100, 0 height. We want to check when this right side is through it. And now, if either one of them, so it's either the left side of my player or the right side of my player is inside of here, we then have a collision. So to make this if statement more manageable, I'm going to create a variable to represent the Boolean of this. So instead of putting all of this over here in X player greater than obstacle, X player less than obstacle, I'm going to say right collision and left collision. The right collision is going to be equal to this X player. Sorry, this is the left collision. I'm going to copy paste all of this code. let's just comment this out so we'll keep explaining this. So we're looking, this is the left collision over here. It's equal to, is the X player greater than the obstacle? And is the X player less than that? And so I'm going to replace this code over here with left collision. Right collision is then going to be the right-hand side of this. So right collision is going to be X player plus 100. Is that greater than X obstacle? And X player plus 100. Is that less than X obstacle plus 100? So if either one of these are true, if either it's colliding with the left side or it's colliding with the right side, it means that we have a collision. And so I'm going to put if left collision, and now I need to say if left collision or right collision. And now, there we go. We get this going, and it should even work if I jump. Cool, I skipped it. Okay, let's get rid of some of these lines because they are causing, let's just comment them out just in case we want to see them again. Okay, so we now have game state. Let's add our score and some sort of way of knowing if we've lost, we need to keep playing. So the way we're going to add a score, we need to create a variable for it. So I'm going to say score. I'm going to make it equal to 0. And every time the obstacle, the X obstacle passes the X coordinate of our player, we want to increment score. So just below our collision logic, I'm going to say if X obstacle is less than X player, then we need to score plus equals 1. And now I think, and what we can do here is, so, okay, we need to be able to show our score. So where we're doing this as well, we're drawing the Y player and Y velocity. I'm going to copy this, paste it. Oh, that is the wrong paste. So I'm copying this line of code on line 33. And now I'm just going to say instead, I'm going to say score. And I'm going to format score. And I now need to put this at 300. You'll notice I get an error. Local variable score referenced before assignment on line 34. So the way I'm going to fix that is by saying the following. Is because I haven't put it in global, in other words, right? I've defined score over here, but I haven't put it in my global variable declarations at the beginning of draw. So I say score. And now, okay, that is going to die. But if I jump over it, okay, cool. We get a score. So it keeps going. If you want to get a very high score, this is great. But what we only want to do is we only want to count it once. So how do we go about counting it once? In essence, we want to reset it. What we want to do to obstacle is we want to move this guy in such a way that it's no longer here. So if it's less than X player, we're going to reset X obstacle to somewhere else on the screen. Let's say it goes to 600. And now I should get 1 and the thing will reset. What we can do is we can just reset it all the way to the width. So it starts all the way at the beginning. And we have a very simple thing. Cool. And now you'll be able to play pretty nice and simply. The thing I'll add is just the end state. So if you've lost. So currently we're just doing this no loop. But we want to say, hey, no, you lost, right? So if this happens, we know we've lost. And so what I want to do instead is I want to say background. Let's draw a new background over everything. And we can say, let's say background red. And we're going to draw some text to the screen to say game over. Let's fill the text white. And we need to draw the text right in the middle of the screen. So let's say width over 2 and height over 2. And now, okay, cool. We get this game over, but it's got all of this weird lines and stuff. So let's just make this look a little bit nicer. We need, we want to just get rid of a stroke. Let's make our stroke black and our stroke weight. I think it's because we've defined our stroke weight again, 1. And now when we lose, yes, okay, we get a much better thing. We get a game over, and you can then show a thing like your score. We can do a whole thing to be like text. And we can add another line over here to say score is score.format, and we say score. And we need to move this to like height over 2 minus 100. And then we'll get a score thing. Okay, we didn't get through everything I wanted to get through. The full version, right, involves getting multiple obstacles and collision with multiple obstacles. And then like getting a few nicer things like to reset the game states, etc. But for now, this is good. This should give you a good foundation in regards to the basics of collision detection, as well as how to counter score and create an end screen. I'm gonna end the session here. We're gonna meet back in 5 minutes in the Zoom call, and that is going to be where we're going to talk about the final submission for the competition. So thank you everyone for joining our live stream for the intermediate workshop. I'll see you guys back in the Zoom call in 5 minutes.